Welcome to Wild and Finally Fucking Free, the show for disruptors, rebels, and revolutionaries who know they're here to change the damn world. I'm Kylie Patchett, your voice and visibility catalyst, and here we dive into unapologetic truth, magnetic messaging, and visibility that actually feels good in your body, your bones, and your business. We share the stories of the out-of-the-box, neuro-sparkly, creative, witchy wild ones rewriting how we live, love, learn, and lead. This isn't about being louder. It's about being rooted, resonant, and regulated so you can be real, raw, and ready to roar. If you're done contorting yourself to fit the mold and you're ready to own your voice, your power, and your place in the revolution, welcome home. Let's dive in. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Kylie here. I am coming down off the high of running Raw live last week. What a delight. Like, I have done voice and visibility activations before and wealth and worth activations before over the last year. And it is always such a delight for me to have rebel entrepreneurs from all around the world coming together to work on releasing themselves from these set points of not yet feeling completely safe to be seen, heard, and richly rewarded, I always say, just for being them. And we had over 100 people from all over the world come together. This live 3-day event, you can actually now get it as an evergreen instant download. So if you're interested, you can find her at kyliepatchett.com/raw, ROAR -live. Yeah. So cool to be on the flip side of a whole year of my own growth as well. If you've been around for a little while, you would know that last year, around about this time last year, actually September of 2024, I was sitting in a coaching session and the beautiful coach I was working with said, so you know you don't want to be doing done for you storytelling. What do you actually want to do? And in fact, she was more blunt than that. She's like, so what do you want to do? Because I was saying how, I was hitting a wall from an energy perspective. My income wasn't able to grow. But also there was this big imbalance between what I knew was required and what I was actually providing people in terms of you can write the most spectacular sales page that looks, feels, and has the same taste and resonance of that beautiful woman. And I was doing done for you sales pages, websites, email sequences, all sorts of things for my clients. But I could tell with some of them that they still had these underground set points of how visible or how safe that they could feel being visible. And I just knew that I was setting them up to fail in a way. Like I was part of the problem because no matter what strategy you put on top of, if you still have blocks to being visible, to being paid for being you, there is a wild bird song in the background here. So I hope that's not being picked up too much, but if it is, welcome to spring in Australia. And so it was a real fork in the road moment in my own business where I really had to kind of have a good hard look at myself and what I had set myself up for in my business, but also really anchor into my own truth, which was, you know what, I don't want to just do the strategy. And I also don't want to do the strategy for people because doing the strategy for someone is like catching a fish for them, but not teaching them how to fish themselves. So at that time, I decided to run a scene, which was a 11-day voice and visibility activation. It was amazing. We had a couple of 100 people from across the world, and it really, really taught me so much about my capacity to hold my own edge of expansion, which was delightful. And also the difference between how I ran Scene last year and how I've just run Raw Live was amazing to really feel the difference between being right at the start of a journey into something with Scene and really having to hold the edge for myself of like, this feels safe. It's okay. I can stretch into what I really want to bring to the world. I can show this wild witchy woo side that I hadn't really brought out to play before. And now this year, just being so much more clear on, I think a fair bit of the overpreneur, which I'm kind of preempting where I'm going with this episode, but a bit of the overpreneur, which I've talked about in earlier episodes where It's like an over delivery, overdoing it kind of energy, not being able to really rest in, your own implicit worth and your own implicit timing and flow and what your genius zone actually is. And when the overpreneur is out to play, there's a lot of like patterns, like trying to give something to everybody in an introductory offer. And when I look back at Scene, like it was amazing. It was also a lot to offer people in the space of an 11-day activation. So I really wanted to just like jam everything in that I knew people needed to know. So it included storytelling strategy and the voice of visibility energetics and the self-devotion practices and really, to be honest, looking back at that whole experience, it was amazing for me to provide it. And also I know that trying to shove everything into something actually loses potency, or it can be very overwhelming for people. So they're trying to drink from a fire hose, but this real sort of like I'm trying to digest so much that you're giving me. And, when you can settle into your skin a lot more, and these days the wild woman inside of me runs my business bus a hell of a lot more than she used to. And Raw Live, it was just a beautiful experience for me to feel in my body how good it felt to turn up and be unapologetically me and offer one really transformative first step for people around voice of visibility. And just the difference between that over delivery and the bit of the grippy, graspy energy of an overpreneur versus this wild woman inside of me that's like, this is the key entry point. Like, this will build a bridge between where you are and where you want to be. Will it solve everything? Absolutely not. Of course you can't in a 3-day event. Like, that would be a ridiculous claim. Well, lots of people on the internet will tell you that. And so, yeah, it's been really, really cool. Really cool. In this episode, though, where I wanted to go, because I feel like this work around what I call the anti-entrepreneurs is so important. And when people were coming into Raw Live and learning about these anti-entrepreneurs and doing the quiz that we've got, which I'll link to at the bottom of this episode, is this kyliepatchett.com/quiz. Any sort of quiz or archetypes or personality system is really just a tool to help us to understand our own patterns, to build self-awareness, to build self-mastery. And so, I'm often having this conversation about human design. People who are really, really into human design will say things like, oh, that's because I'm a triple split, or yes, that's the bloody blah. And it's like, okay, these are tools to help to get to know ourselves. They're not rule books. So if you are kind of so into a system that you're actually limiting yourself or giving yourself another box, that's just shining your handcuffs, right? Having said that, these are really helpful ways of understanding patterns that are just human behavior patterns. So I wanted to introduce you to the anti-entrepreneurs. And this is like a little taste. You can go and do the quiz. You absolutely could go and do Raw Live, the whole experience, which is now a self-study. Just like have a listen in and be like, oh, that one feels familiar. Now, the thing before I get into the anti-entrepreneurs is I want to kind of start with some rules of reality. So in my version of the universe, you are unique. I've talked about this on the podcast before. You are someone who has never happened before, will never happen again. Your unique genetics, your unique preferences, your unique energetics, which is really what human design is talking about. Your unique, like flavors, stories, belief systems, thought processes, all of those things are unique to you. And so even, you and I are having the same experience. Well, not really, but, there could be hundreds of you out there listening to this episode, but every single person is going to experience listening to this in very different ways because we've all got different ways of making sense of things, different belief systems, different patterns, different previous experiences. What I will say is rules of reality wise, you are unique. And I often use the words unique or unicorn. You are a unicorn. There is never going to be anyone else like you. And you have a gift and a genius to share with the world. And, you could argue with me until you're blue in your face about the reality of that. But that is my belief system. Every single person is here to bring their gift to the world, to kind of unwrap themselves. And then we come into the world, as babies. We don't have issues with being seen or being ourselves. But as we grow up, we learn from caretakers, from the education system, from the societal, cultural, environmental, patriarchal, fill in the bullshit system here, systems, that there is right ways to behave, to think, to dress, to relate to others based on collective rules about, how you should do those things in order to be loved, accepted, safe. And so when we're talking about visibility blocks or visibility, I really actually don't love the word blocks. I like the language of learned limitation. So these are ways that you have learned that being yourself is somehow not right. Now, I would argue that what the world needs is you in your unapologetic truth. And what that means is bringing your gift to the world and understanding that the ways that you've learned that you're not right in your natural way, as in learned limitations, that we actually dig underneath them and question them so that you can choose whether you actually want that to be your rules of reality. So around here, the expectation and the very foundation which we stand on is you are unique, you are amazing, you are, a combination of trillions of cells all working together biologically, but also your unique gifts and energetics are all needed. And I am super passionate about this one fact that I don't believe that we can have a healthy collective, and goodness knows we are seeing that throughout the world, until we actually teach individuals how to be happy and healthy and fulfilled. And part of that is unlearning all the ways in which they have been taught that they're not right. So that is the rules of reality. So let's move on to the anti-entrepreneurs. I have got the notes here. So if you're watching on video, you're going to see me glancing down because I want to make sure that I am really capturing these archetypes. So the other thing to say is if you are new around here, I really, really want you to understand that this environment, this culture, this collective of humans that come together in resonance with my own message, I like to think of them as like the Mad Hatters, right? So I'm talking to you if you're creative, artistic, out of the box, don't understand the matrix, don't agree with systems of oppression. If you have ever been taught by any of the isms, so including, gender socialization, racism, classism, et cetera, like every single one of the isms, right? You are here and resonating with this message because underneath everything, you believe in integrity in business. You believe in being authentic. And I know that that is overused. You are here growing a business to offer a legacy to the world. You might not use that language, but there is much more important, like the contribution and the ability to positively contribute is a driving factor, far more than the surface level of the get X money or be able to not work in a job or whatever. Underpinning in this beautiful rebel heart is a heart that beats because it cares about other people. And you are likely also to have similar values in that you believe everyone has a right to a voice at the table. There should not be any hierarchical, I am better than you. And that you believe in liberation and freedom. And I don't mean liberation and freedom only if you agree with me or we share exactly the same belief systems. I mean freedom and liberation for all, because we cannot say that we are working towards liberation or freedom if we're only opening it up to certain people, right? Certain bodies, certain colors, certain genders, certain whatever. If you're here also, one of the things that has become so crystal clear to me in this whole last few weeks in terms of like sharing my message with a new group of, more than 100 people across the world, is that there's a commonality in you've got this like real desire to create impact, to create influence, and yes, to create income. Obviously, a business has to be sustainable. It has to nourish you as much as it does your clients. But maybe right now you are feeling like your messaging is maybe a little bit off, or you're wanting to go from this X way of doing business, but you're aware that there's something like calling to your soul that's like, this is not the fullness of who I want to be or how I want to work with people. It might be that you're not like distinctly clear on calling in what I call your soulmate clients. So not just the people that feel kind of safe at the moment to work with and not in the way that it feels safe to work with. And I'm a perfect example. Done few storytelling work, very safe. I know that I'm good at it. I know that I can do a really good job at it. And also, it wasn't the fullness of what I was being called to deliver, because that is not my whole gift. My gift, the golden thread storytelling gift is absolutely alive in me. But the other one is self-reclamation, right? Being able to pattern spot your learned limitations, even if you can't see them yourself, and help you to understand how to liberate yourself from learned patterns of behavior. If these are true in your business as well, and maybe there's also a whole group of people that I intersect with that are being called to entrepreneurship as a vehicle for these things. So maybe you haven't quite started your business yet, but you've got this desire. And the thing is, like me, you want soul-fueled and sustainable. And that is the way that I capture, like, sustainable as in, it has to be something that actually creates an income, and it has to do it in a way that does not require you to sacrifice your soul, your scruples, your sanity, your health, your family time. And that, by definition, means that we have to unlearn all the ways in which we have been taught to work hard, or that we can't just receive for doing and being who we are, which is utter bullshit, by the way. So let's get into these anti-entrepreneurs. I feel like I could rabbit on for years and years and years about, the benefits of understanding these. But when we think about visibility, like, a lot of people will talk about visibility in terms of strategy, and that is absolutely part of it. So it's like, how do I get more eyeballs on my work? Do I use a podcast to speak to people? Do I like long form blog posts? Do I want to, be a guest on other people's podcasts? Do I want to work on SEO? There's so many different ways of visibility, like pathways. When I'm talking about visibility with these archetypes, it is the ways in which we can screw with ourselves that basically say, if I become more visible, it is going to cost me something. And there is an underpinning fear in every single one of these. So when I talk about the anti-entrepreneurs, and I think we'll do 3 per episode. So this will be like part 1 of the anti-entrepreneurs. So understanding these archetypes of how you can be screwing with your visibility in your business, and I'll explain as we go on, it gives you the ability to, first of all, understand that this is not you. So every single one of these archetypes are learned patterns of behavior. Now, I mentioned this a couple of sessions ago, but I wrote a book about these patterns in 2015 called Making Friends with Fear, through the lens of mindset, human behavior coaching, leadership coaching, the chakra system, and traditional Chinese medicine 5-element theory. Then I've been getting into human design once I found True Sidereal, and listen out, because we're just about to put out an episode with Annalena Fuchs, who is a human design True Sidereal expert. And when I started going down that rabbit hole, I was like, oh my God, these patterns of behavior around business and visibility and the way we can screw with ourselves actually line up to the 9 centers in human design. So if you know human design, you are most likely going to see flavors of the conditioning that can happen in open/undefined centers. Now, if you don't know human design, it doesn't matter, because this is a system that layers on top of the existing system but has a flavor of human design in it. It doesn't mean you need to understand human design. So when we think about these archetypes, my question to you is, who is driving your business bus? Is it, and if we try to emphasize, like, from an internal family systems perspective, like the work of Richard Schwartz, we would talk about this through the lens of, is your authentic self with a capital S, driving your business bus, or is there a protector part or a manager part? And all that means is that a part in the system that makes up who you are and your learned ways of being, that is trying to protect you from the pain that you experienced earlier in life. So each of the core fears that we're going to talk about in the archetypes are the type of fear that these protectors are trying to run interference on, right? And if we borrow again from the lens of internal family system, when we are in our true self energy, or what I call the wild woman energy, there's like 8 C's, and I always forget like number 7 and number 8. So I'm going to read them. So you know that you're in this energy when you're feeling calm, curious, compassionate, confident, courageous, creative, connected, and clear. Now, if you feel into that energy and how often that is actually existing in your business day to day, and how often that energy is driving the business bus, and if you're like most of my clients, they're like, maybe she's never driven. And I'm like, yeah, same, hard relate. That's where I was at a set point, a year ago. And then the flip side is if she's not driving, then understanding that there is actually fear or, again, protectors/managers if you're using internal family systems. But again, if you're not familiar with that, you'll understand the felt sense between being in that calm, curious, authentic self energy versus when fear is driving the show. So fear of people seeing you, fear of rejection, fear of not belonging, fear of trying and failing, fear of trying and succeeding, because there's both of those. And so when those protector parts are driving the bus, the protector parts, I think it's important to understand that, when we talk about, the damage that trauma does, and often when we're saying trauma, we mean big T trauma, so obvious trauma, but less obvious form trauma, or being a child of emotionally immature parents, for instance, that is more of it's not necessarily like people may not think of that as trauma, but it's trauma because it's actually neglect that's creating the patterns of not being able to see and be heard in your own, life and family system. The other ways that these things can be laid down, these learned limitations that, create the fear and the doubt and the not self energy, is all the conditioning that I just spoke about. So not only family of origin, but think about the education system and what it taught you. Think about larger systems in society. So whether there's cultural expectations, whether there's gender socialization, if you, identify with one or other of the binary, but also if you don't identify with one or other of the binary genders, then how does that, living in a maybe family or society or culture, whatever, who was either open or not open to you just being your full self if you were not identifying as male or female. And this whole concept that kind of was the birthplace of Raw Live was what I had this realization in a client session. I was like, oh my God, they don't burn witches anymore. They don't need to. They trained us to burn ourselves. So all of these layers of conditioning become this internal system in our head that is basically an internal expression of an external system of oppression, which when you work that out, you're like, oh, shit. So overall generalization, we have been taught, particularly if you've been, well, no, I'm not even going to say that. I was going to say if you were, particularly if you've been socialized female. I actually don't even think that is the whole truth of what I want to say. If you have been taught at any level, no matter what lens it's come through, that you should be scared of your full power, your full magic, your unapologetic truth, and then you sign up for entrepreneurship, which is a wild ride in meeting every single part of you anyway, because you're doing something that's edgy, it's pioneering, it's outside the matrix. It requires you to ask for money for what you do. It requires you to market yourself, like all of these things that entrepreneurship will, bumps up against the edges of all of these parts, right? These parts will show up when we are sharing our work, when we're asking for a sale, when we're creating an offer suite, when we're calling in our clients, like everywhere, pretty much. And so this is why I will never, ever work on strategy with a client without the underpinning energy and emotional resourcing to be able to hold yourself at the edge of the expansion of what does feel safe to be seen, heard, and richly rewarded. So here's what happens most of the time. We have a scared part protector, a manager running the show. The wild woman is not in the business driver's seat, generally. Then we go looking for a strategy because we've been taught in the marketplace that someone else has the answers. So we'll try on a one-size-fits-all solution, and or we get talked into working with, a a big coach who should have our answers, or spending, a lot of money going on, one of those 25K masterminds or 50K masterminds or whatever it is. Unfortunately, if we are adding that strategy and that money pressure often to these scared parts running the show, what we're setting ourselves up for is meltdown, failure, unsustainable strategy, a business that does not honor our own flow, our own energetics. And it is completely for this reason that I am absolutely opposed to teaching voice, visibility, marketing, communication, and sales through the lens of strategy only, because I don't care what strategy you are using. Number one, if it's one size fits all strategy, it probably doesn't fit you. But number two, if you're putting it on a shaky foundation of all of these voice and visibility, learned limitations running the show, you're setting yourself up to fail. And that has got to stop. Like, this is enough, right? So we're getting to the time for this episode. So let me just wrap up. So the key things here are: you have a genius, you have gifts to bring to the world. You have also been taught, more than likely, in some levels, that you are not okay to turn up as your full self, as your unapologetic, truth-talking self. And so these visibility Achilles heels are patterns of behavior. I don't want you to be using them as a diagnosis or a limitation or a box. These are designed for you to have self-awareness, because I truly believe that one of the only true paths to freedom, which is my highest value, is self-mastery. Because you can have all the external freedom, all of the, the privilege or the benefit or the advantage, whatever, in your external reality, in your material reality. But if you don't have freedom inside of your mind, then you're not free. Like, if you've got an amazing life, but you're still like got this part that's oppressing internally, observing you, getting you to walk on eggshells or people please, or make sure that everybody else is, the martyr cake wearing, style of things, then you're not free. So what the fuck's the point, right? So when I go through these Achilles heels, so I'm going to do it in 2 more episodes because I really don't want to make these long. I am going to talk about the fear frame of each one, the flip side frequency, because here's the thing. We think, don't do that. That is actually going to make us feel really afraid and have this spike of the fear that's underpinning it. And you'll hear me go through the patterns. But the thing is that the flip side of the fear is actually the thing that will give you the most freedom. And I always think of it like, if you imagine that your full, whole self, using lots of hand movements, if you're listening, doing audio, your full self, if we could assign like 100%, that's my full self, my full, unapologetic, unfiltered, just natural self. And then you can think, okay, so how much of that 100% comes to play in my business? I guarantee if these visibility Achilles heels are online, a lot of your 100% power is actually plugged into rule-based systems about how you need to be seen, heard, and richly rewarded. And so that means that you're going into the marketplace, with less power, less magnetism, less like a sense of worthiness, less confidence, less calm, less access to your full self, because all of these rules are running in the background. So I'm going to wrap up this episode right here, and then I'm going to come back and introduce you to them. So let's do it in 2 more parts. So we're going to start at the top. We're starting with a dreampreneur. Come back and listen in. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If this episode lit a fire in your body, in your business, deep down in your bones, please take a moment to drop a rating and review so more rebels just like you can find us. And don't keep this goodness to yourself. Share it with your disruptive rebel and revolutionary friends who are ready to roar right alongside of you. Until next time, stay wild, stay unapologetic, and stay fucking free.